Today we're going to be looking at using Canva as a way to advertise your campaigns when you're setting up for a new game. I've used Canva for lots of things, but this is the first time I've used this particular tool. And I built this a while back because I was intending to use this to advertise for an online game that I was going to run through Foundry VTT. And my intention was to place the link for this in like LFG servers and message boards and so on and so forth as a like more information here type of thing. Or in those places where you can't post links because they've got really strict rules, I could at least send it through direct message to anybody who indicated interest. But I'm going to walk you through a couple of the features of this style of campaign site and show you how it can help your recruitment efforts moving forward. We begin with this big picture pitch, some cool artwork. You've got some images of the main books that we're going to be using. I'm going to be running a Underdark focused campaign. Surprise, surprise for those of you who know me. In this case, I'm going to be merging Night Below and Rise of the Drow. Night Below I've run several times and I'm really familiar with it. Rise of the Drow is one of those books that I have always wanted to run, but I've just never found time. And by merging the two, I can lean into Night Below for familiar elements while still incorporating a lot of the really cool things that Rise of the Drow offers as well. I'm also really loving the Tales of the Valiant rules as an alternative to 5e, and you can't go wrong with Flea Mortals, MCDM's new monster book, which is crazy awesome in that it has lots of monsters that are really tactically interesting and have lots of cool abilities that let you do interesting things on the battlefield that are more than just swing a sword, hit or miss, move on to the next turn. I've actually done some monster highlight videos for Flea Mortals and Rise of the Drow, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, I'll throw those links in the description so you can check those out. But in any case, back to the point, this is kind of the splash page, the first thing people see. You want to give them an overview of what they can expect from your game. Now when players see this as an actual website, they're just going to be able to scroll down and see next page, next page, next page. So I've got the next couple of pages set up with kind of a setting overview. And I'm looking for kind of the feel of this is what you would put on the back cover of a book for this kind of campaign. The little blurb that gives you just enough to get you hooked and be excited without putting in any major spoilers. In this case, we've got the rural region of Heronshire, showing how it's kind of in a forgotten corner of the world where not a lot of exciting things happen. But we know that our characters are going to be in this really isolated region, but are going to run into a sinister plot that would have them move down into the Underdark and start investigating things below the surface. We've set up the initial setting, we've established that it's an isolated region, then we give a little bit of preview of the villains of the story. We've got this Drow faction that is doing some crazy stuff, and it's going to affect the surface, and some of those interactions between Underworld and Surface World are what are going to draw the heroes into the conflict. With the next page, we give a brief overview of how far this campaign is going to go. No, it's not going to end in just a shallow little dungeon when you find the Drow wizard or whatever. It's going to be deep in the Underdark. You're going to see unique inhabitants, battled, lots of horrors, epic locations, and with that we've given people an idea of what our campaign is going to be like. Then we move down into some of the slightly crunchier bits of the website, some of its more functional purposes. There's a social contract that I go ahead and put in. This is negotiable at session 0 or any time as the campaign goes on, but I like to kind of throw out some of my initial expectations to players. Did a video about that recently as well. I'll throw a link in the description. Got a link to the character building guidelines, which in this case, we're just running 5e, and players have the choice of building a character in either traditional Dungeons and Dragons rules or with Tales of the Valiant rules. And then on the back end, from the DM side, I'm going to be running things Tales of the Valiant style. Since the systems are so closely aligned, it's really easy to go back and forth and incorporate elements of both without any issues. I've got other rules here, which I'm not actually sure how many of these I'm going to use, but I'm going to propose and talk about them with my players as the game begins. A couple of things that I want to incorporate from the Nimble rules. I backed the first Kickstarter and I loved it. I really like the dying condition rules. I like the resting rules. I like the exhaustion rules. We're also going to be using some rules from the survivalist guide. I'm pointing behind my shoulder and then I'm realizing that you can't actually see it in the little circle. But the survivalist's guide to spelunking, which is actually one of my favorite books for just kind of thinking through what the Underdark looks like. and thinking through all the different types of terrain and things that players will encounter while they're down there. And then last, I've got my DM house rule with modified milestone leveling. I'm trying to remember if I did a video on this or not. I know I plan to. If I haven't done it yet, I'm going to do one soon, and I'll put a link to that in the description as well. If you don't see a link, it just means I haven't done the video yet. In any case, last but not least, we have an interested apply here button where players can click and fill out a little questionnaire. The application is a pretty short application, mostly with contact information, but I do ask for a few demographic things like age and how long you've been playing and what days of the week you're available, that kind of thing. There's a couple questions at the end that get a little personal where I'm asking things like, is there any content that you want me to avoid in sessions? That lets me kind of avoid triggers for people. There's a question about any pet peeves that might come up in role-playing game that you would like to avoid. That just helps me make sure that we're a good fit for each other. Going through this question by question is a better topic for another video where I can really go into detail. If you're using this to recruit, you need some way for players to be able to indicate their interest, and I find that a Google form works really well for that. Lastly, I end with a frequently asked questions section, just kind of some questions that I anticipate people asking, like for this particular time period that I'm starting this game. I know that D&D 5.5e or whatever is going to be coming out relatively soon, and people are going to want to know if they can switch over to those rules, and I'm cool with it. I'm still going to be using Tales of the Valiant on the DM side, but if you want to run the new Paladin or whatever, more power to you. This is also a great place to share things like whether or not it's a paid game, and I provide my own direct contact email just in case there are more questions that need to be answered that aren't on the FAQ yet. And that's pretty much it. And I ended up not using this because I wound up being able to recruit enough in-person players to not have to play on Foundry VTT, which is awesome, and that game is starting up within the next couple weeks. But I have a modified version of this same document that I sent to all those players as well, just to kind of give them an idea of what the campaign is expected to be like, what the character creation options are, and basically just address a lot of the early questions that often come from starting up a new campaign, that if I share this document, the answers are already there, and players don't have to send me 4, 5, 6 different individual messages that then I respond to individually. It's very efficient. If you have any questions about this site, this process, throw them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. And we are less than a week away from GenCon, so I hope I see you there.